5 lives. That's not a metaphor in the tradition I've been pulling apart since last spring. It's a count. Your soul, according to a framework older than any church you've sat in, is not one thing. It's 5, layered, and you were only given the lowest one when you were born. The rest have to be earned. Each one costs a full lifetime to get right. And if you fail, you repeat that level until you don't. 5 tiers, 5 minimum lifetimes, and a mechanism built into the system that strips your memory clean between each one. A cup, administered by 5 rulers the Pistis Sophia actually names. I'm going to lay that claim out tonight, every piece of it, and I'm going to tell you which pieces come from a manuscript and which ones are mine. Because this crosses 3 traditions written more than 1,000 years apart. The fact that they all land on the same number is the part I can't set down. I'm John Blackwell. I picked this one up because of 4 verses in Genesis that say something in Hebrew the English doesn't carry. Now, if you guys wanted the uncensored version of the Ethiopian Bible, all 88 books, it's now available on our website, also the personal readings. Both links are in the description, or scan this QR code. So, Genesis 5, 10 patriarchs from Adam to Noah, and every entry follows the same formula. He lived this many years, he fathered a son, he lived this many more, and then the Hebrew text uses the verb lamut. He died. Adam lamut, Seth lamut, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, Lamut, 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 Lamut. Every single one, the same verb, the same full stop, until you get to number 7. Enoch lived 365 years. And the text does not say Lamut. It uses a completely different word, lakach, which means to take, to remove, to seize by someone with the authority to do it. God took him, not received, not welcomed, took. Pulled him out of the line everyone else was standing in. And there's another verb doing work in that passage that barely survives translation. The phrase walked with God uses the Hebrew hithalek, which is a reflexive, intensive form of the verb to walk. It doesn't mean he went for strolls in a pleasant direction. It means continuous, reciprocal communion, the kind of sustained contact that the other 9 patriarchs are never credited with, not even once across lifespans of 800 and 900 years. Enoch did it in 365, a solar number, a complete orbit. He also sits 7th from Adam. And that position mirrors something older than Genesis itself. The Sumerian king list places a king named Enmeduranki 7th in the antediluvian sequence, ruling from Sippar, which was the cult city of the sun god Shamash. Enmeduranki gets summoned to a heavenly assembly, seated on a golden throne, taught the secrets of heaven and earth, and sent back down to hand them to his priests. 7th position, solar city, celestial secrets, direct transmission to humans. The overlap is close enough that once you put both lists side by side, the correspondence stops looking accidental. But the Judean scribes who wrote the Enochic tradition took that mirror and reversed it. In Babylon, the heavenly knowledge comes down as a gift, legitimate and blessed. In 1st Enoch, the same transmission is the catastrophe that breaks the world. 200 watchers descend, teach what they shouldn't, and the earth fills with blood. Same architecture, opposite verdict. What neither tradition tells you is why Enoch, out of 10 patriarchs, with access to the same God, was the one who got pulled out instead of buried in the ground. They all had long lives, they all had the tradition, and 9 of them got Lamut at the end. Whatever the answer is, it didn't come from Genesis. It came from a town in the Galilee hills called Safed, written 1500 years after the original text, by people who had spent their whole careers inside a system of thought most of the Western world has never encountered in plain language. The Kabbalists of 16th century Safed built an architecture of the human soul that I want to lay out for you now. Because this is where the number 5 originates, and it is not the 5 books of the Enochic corpus. In Lurianic Kabbalah, the soul has 5 levels. The lowest is Nefesh, the basic life force. instinct and physical behavior. Above it, ruach, which the Hebrew renders as wind or spirit, the emotional center, the part that governs moral choice and sometimes chooses wrong. Above that, neshama, the higher intellect, abstract thought, divine understanding. Then chaya, which translates roughly as living essence, a bridge into territory that exceeds human logic entirely. And at the top, yekida, singularity. The point where the soul and God are no longer two things. You don't get all five when you arrive. You get nefesh. That's it. The rest have to be earned through what the tradition calls Gilgul Haneshamot, the rolling of souls or recycling. The Hebrew carries both, but rolling gives you the better picture, something that comes around again. This is not karma, it is not a punishment wheel, it is targeted, restorative, and attached to a specific mission every time. You live, you work on the level you've been given. If you manage to rectify your nefesh fully, you die and come back. But this time nefesh is already locked in, and ruach opens. Your mission now is to get that one right, fail, and you come back to ruach again. Succeed and neshama opens, 5 levels, 5 lifetimes at minimum, and the minimum is the best case. The texts are clear that most souls don't pass a level on the first try. Some come back to the same tier multiple times, working the same ground, dealing with the same category of failure, life after life, without any conscious memory that they've attempted it before. If you've ever felt like you keep running into the same wall in different rooms, is it possible that the room isn't the problem? The Lurianic system says yes, and it says the wall is specific to the soul level you're operating on. Nefesh failures look different from ruach failures. The challenges aren't random, they're diagnostic. And the Kabbalists didn't whisper this, they wrote it into the Zohar and the Lurianic texts, and taught it to students in a stone building in the hills above the Sea of Galilee, where the rooms were small and the windows didn't close all the way. Which I mention only because I've seen pictures of the site and it looks nothing like the scale of what they were claiming. If you grew up hearing you get one life and one judgment, and then at some point you ran into this, I want to know what that collision felt like. Because I sat with it for a long time before I said anything about it publicly. Here's where Enoch becomes the hinge of the whole thing. In 3 Enoch, a later text also called the Hebrew Book of Enoch, dated to late antiquity or early medieval period, Enoch doesn't just tour the heavens. He is transformed physically, spiritually, converted into the archangel Metatron, called the Lesser YHWH, and seated on a throne beside the divine glory. That's not a reward for good behavior, that's an ontological shift, a change in what he is at the level of species. How? If death was the absolute consequence of Adam's transgression, if every human born after the garden was locked into that verdict from their first breath, how did Enoch walk out of it? The Lurianic answer runs on exactly the mechanism I just described. Enoch, they argued, was a reincarnation of the pristine, unblemished sparks of Adam's original soul. After the fall, Adam's soul shattered into countless fragments scattered across human history, each requiring rectification. The fragment that arrived in Genesis as Enoch managed to complete the repair. Every level, all 5 rectified, his soul returned to its pre-fall state. And because the consequence of the fall is death and his soul had undone the fall, that consequence simply didn't apply anymore. Lakash. Taken, not because God chose a favorite, but because there was nothing left to hold him here. That's the Kabbalistic read of Genesis chapter 5, verse 24, and I want to own exactly how far it reaches. It solves the Lakash problem cleanly. It explains why 1 man out of 10 didn't die, and it maps to the 5-tier architecture without any forcing. But I should be careful now, and I want you to see where I'm being careful. The authentic text of 1st Enoch, composed in the 3rd century BC, does not mention reincarnation. It describes a linear afterlife. Chapter 22 lays out 4 hollow chambers carved inside a great mountain in the west. Enoch is shown them on his cosmic tour, guided by the archangel Raphael, and the separation is deliberate. One chamber holds the righteous dead in a space of light with a spring of water. Another holds sinners who were never punished in life. A third holds those who were killed unjustly, whose blood still cries out. Each chamber is conscious. The souls inside them know where they are. They know what's coming, and they're waiting for a bodily resurrection and a final division that sorts them permanently. That is not a cycle, that's a cue. And I've spent enough time in the Geas to know that reading is solid, and I'm not going to dress it up as something else. Were you taught that the soul goes somewhere immediately after death, or were you taught that it waits? Because the version in chapter 22 is neither heaven nor hell. It's storage, and almost nobody I've talked to about this knew the Book of Enoch had a position on it at all. And there's a second category of trapped entity in the text that nobody puts next to the soul chambers, but I think belongs there. The Nephilim, half angel, half human, born from the mixing on Hermon. When the flood destroyed their bodies, the spiritual half couldn't die and the human half couldn't ascend. The text says their disembodied spirits became the evil spirits that roam the earth, afflicting, oppressing, hungering without bodies to feed, permanently stuck between two systems, belonging fully to neither. Look at what the text has built: 4 chambers for the human dead, a class of spirits with no chamber at all, wandering. And then Enoch, who goes to neither place. Every patriarch before him and after him ends up stored, waiting. He gets lakach. Different verb, different destination, different outcome entirely. If the 4 chambers are the system, Enoch is the single human exception to it. And the only tradition that has ever produced a mechanical explanation for why he qualified is the Kabbalistic 5-tier framework, built 15 centuries after the original text. I don't have a position on whether that means the Kabbalists found something the original authors buried, or whether they engineered a solution so elegant it looks native in retrospect. I've gone back and forth on it more times than I want to admit, and I'm not going to land somewhere just to give you a clean ending. That accounts for the 5 lives. What it doesn't touch yet is the forgetting. The Pistis Sophia is a Coptic Gnostic text, and it sits inside a universe that doesn't look much like the one First Enoch describes. In the Gnostic cosmology, the material world is not a gift. It's a prison built by a lesser deity and maintained by hostile authorities called archons. Every human soul trapped inside it carries a divine spark, and the goal is to acquire enough knowledge to escape. What the Pistis Sophia adds, and the part that locked my reading for weeks, is the bureaucracy. 5 great rulers of fate. These 5 are responsible for catching the soul after death, fashioning a new body and binding the old soul into it. But before the soul goes back down, the ruler of the eons does something specific. He mixes what the text calls the cup of forgetfulness with the seed of wickedness, and he forces the soul to drink. The effect is total. The soul forgets every region it has visited, every punishment it experienced, every scrap of knowledge it managed to gather. Gone. Instantly. But the cup doesn't just erase. According to the text, the liquid transforms inside the soul and solidifies into a parasitic structure the Pistis Sophia calls the counterfeit spirit, the antimaimon pneuma. This structure binds itself to the real soul and runs for the duration of the next life, generating desire, confusion, spiritual fatigue. Its only job is to keep you from remembering what you actually are. So you never accumulate enough knowledge to break free, so you fail, so you die, so they catch you again. That is not forgetting the way we use the word. That is installation, something placed inside you before you arrive, running the entire time you're here, designed by the same 5 authorities who recycled you into the body in the first place. The text treats this as infrastructure, not metaphor. 5 administrators, a chemical process, a parasitic output, and a system built to repeat. If your family or your tradition had a name for the thing that pulls you sideways, right when you get closest to clarity, the drag that shows up at the exact wrong moment, I want to hear it. Every household I've asked seems to carry a word for it, and almost none of them trace it back to this text. I spent 2 months reading commentary on the counterfeit spirit specifically, and what kept me there wasn't the idea itself, it was the precision. This isn't vague spiritual language about the darkness of the flesh, it's an engineering diagram. Inputs, installation, a defined behavioral output, a feedback loop that reinforces itself. If you've ever had a period in your life where you felt like you were close to something real and then watched yourself sabotage it for no reason you could name, I'd like to know how you explain that to yourself afterward. I'm not saying the Pistis Sophia has the answer, I'm saying it has a framework, and the framework is more specific than anything I was given growing up. Do you see what's sitting on the table now? 3 traditions, 3 different centuries, 1 Mesopotamian king template that gives Enoch his solar number and his 7th position, 1 Jewish mystical architecture that divides the soul into 5 levels, each requiring a full lifetime, and uses Enoch as the proof that completion is possible. 1 Gnostic operations manual that names 5 rulers, enforcing amnesia between rounds, and describes the specific tool they use to keep the soul from remembering. 5 levels, 5 rulers, 5 lifetimes. 1 man who completed the sequence and left the system without dying. That convergence is either the most productive coincidence in the history of religious thought, or it isn't a coincidence. I want to be honest about what I'm holding and what I'm not. The authors of First Enoch would not have recognized the Kabbalistic soul. The Gnostics who wrote the Pistis Sophia operated in a cosmology the Kabbalists would have rejected on sight. These weren't collaborators, they were separated by language, geography, and over 1,000 years of history, answering different questions for different communities under